This interview is brought to you in association with Rabobank.
Hello and welcome to another series of Rural Delivery online interviews. Today, the Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Guy, joins me. Minister, welcome and thanks for taking the time.
Oh, good to catch up, Roger. Always enjoy the opportunity. Thank you.
Well, we don't have a lot of time and you have got a pretty broad portfolio, and I was thinking this morning that a portfolio that's affected by both the weather and global commodity prices, so perhaps not an enviable position. I'd like to cover off two of those today. Let's just start with the weather. We have got some drought events happening around the country. What's the latest information you've got on how things are going?
Well, by and large, farmers are breathing a big sigh of relief, Roger, that the big El Nino event that was predicted by many didn't actually eventuate. Certainly in North Canterbury, it's still a bit of a hot spot there, but they had some good rain through the latter part of December and January. So we've carried that declaration on there, medium-scale drought event for the east coast of the South Island, because we realise it is going to take a little bit of time for them to rebound. But certainly everyone's just saying, well, thank goodness that the El Nino didn't cripple the pastoral sector this summer. And a lot of my farming contacts on the east coast of the North Island are certainly saying, well, if this is El Nino, we'll have it every summer, thanks very much. There's pretty much plentiful grass supply in most parts of New Zealand, certainly Wairarapa, Hawke's Bay through to Gisborne. We're still also keeping a bit of a watching brief on what's happening on the storm recovery on the lower North Island around that sort of Whanganui, Taranaki area. We put some support mechanisms in to support those farmers and get them back on their own 2 feet. But by and large, farmers aren't interested in government handouts. They just want to know that Wellington acknowledges the pain that they are in, and that we can do what we can to support them through. And that's obviously Rural Support Trust, where we fund to sit around the kitchen table and help farming families make some tough decisions ahead of them, whether it's droughts or dealing with storms. We've got rural assistance payments, which is basically the unemployment benefit for those farming families that are finding things pretty tough, and some flexibility through IRD as well.
We've dodged a bullet perhaps this time around. But those severe weather events, they will come eventually. What are the broader policy settings that you're looking at in terms, particularly around drought, about how we manage water across these primary production regions?
Yeah, what's not well understood is that we only collect and store about 2% of the rain that falls in this country. The majority of it gets in the local creeks and rivers and heads out to sea. If you look at just the Wairarapa, we were just talking about that a moment ago, they get on average about 5 metres of rain in the Tararuas, and then you move to Martinborough, where on average they get about 700 mils. So, if you're a good cricket player, you could almost throw a ball from the Tararuas to Martinborough. It's not a huge distance apart. It just goes to show that we don't have the rain falling at the right place at the right time. So that's why we're very supportive of water storage projects. We've got about 150 million invested in 2 funds. That's the Irrigation Acceleration Fund to get some of these regional water storage projects up and going, and also the Crown Irrigation Scheme to come in and support some of these bigger schemes as well. So we're doing a lot in this space. We're working very closely with a lot of these schemes. We realise that there's a huge amount of potential for exports and economic activity in some of these regions, and we see that as I move around the country, in places like Oamaru, where the schools have been repopulated, suddenly farm merchandise stores have popped up and growing, and that whole community's feeling pretty good about water storage. The other opportunity with water storage is that there's big, significant environmental gains. If we have a look at the Central Plains scheme, stage 1 kicked off last year by the Prime Minister, about 15,000 hectares, and the stage 2 and 3 in the wings as well. That's taken a huge amount of pressure off the groundwater aquifers. As a result of that, it's now a river charge and a river store system. That water can flow through to Lake Ellesmere, Te Waihora. So you've got significant environmental benefits, and also it's good for local economic growth and growing our exports as well.
The grass is growing, it's a good thing. Unfortunately, if you're a dairy farmer at the moment, that grass isn't worth quite what it was a couple of years ago. We've had some good news overnight. We've seen a little bit of a rise in global dairy trade auction prices. No one in the world's having a great time with dairy at the moment, and it's expected to be a while before New Zealand farmers get back to where they'd like to be. Does the length of time that it might take for dairy prices to come back concern you?
Yes, it does. If you have a look back through over the last sort of 15 or so years, there's a huge amount of volatility in the milk price. In 02 to 06 is around $4.20. The average for the 15 years is about $5.25. It just seems to be that we're going to be in this period of volatility for a bit longer than we all expected. It's going to be lower for longer. And Fonterra stepping forward with their interest-free loan, that's helped to take some of the tough decisions off farmers. But ultimately, the cost of production is coming down, and that is a good thing. Some of our farming systems have grown a bit quicker than we all perhaps anticipated, and there's high cost structures. Dairy NZ are now saying that the cost of production is down by 30 cents a kilo of milk solids. In fact, it could even come lower than that. So I guess that's the message that I have, is that farmers need to, as they're doing, look inside their farm gate, try and trim their business to make it as efficient and lean as possible. The reason that we are seeing milk prices being a bit sluggish is the world is basically awash with milk. The Russian ban has meant that product coming out of Europe in the past, which was predominantly butter and cheese, that's had to be made into whole milk powder, and that's come into some of our traditional markets. The China inventory has taken a while to work its way through, but it's interesting, I think China's back into the GDT market now, and that's why we're seeing a little tick up there recently, which is positive. The US is exporting a bit more. So all of those things, and I guess the other one is the oil-dependent countries. The price of oil is low, that's good for farmers, but ultimately it reduces their buying power in some of those big economies. So all of those things just mean that we're in an unusual sort of set of circumstances, and it basically is a supply and demand thing that needs to correct itself. So I would say that 2016 is going to continue to be a period of volatility. Farmers should sit down with their bankers and rural support trusts and accountants, professional advisors, and seek as much advice as possible. I've recently met the banks. They're saying by and large they want to support these farmers through. And we've also, last year's field days, announced $500,000 working closely with the Ministry for Health in our mental health wellness initiatives. And that's about training more people to drive down the tanker driveway, sit around the kitchen table, to look for the early signs of depression, to make sure that farmers know there's a huge amount of support out there, and they should look to pick up the phone and talk to people.
Perhaps a better news story. This week you got to be involved with this. The launch of this new premium seafood label, Te Aki, came out of a PGP program, which is about halfway through precision seafood harvesting. Fantastic example of how an industry can look at how it operates at a very fundamental level and carry that right through to the market.
Yeah, this is a hugely exciting primary growth partnership initiative. 3 of the major seafood industry players are on board with MPI. I guess to summarise it for your listeners, it's a fantastic net design. It's a tubular one where the fish come and are caught inside this net where there's holes for them to escape on size. They then come on board the vessel alive. So there's another opportunity there for the human eye to do a selection. They're then put in these holding tanks. So you've got the whole sustainability of our fish stocks and our oceans are hugely important to us as an exporting nation. Then you have the ability to export these fish that are actually all about freshness, and that's where the Te Aki brand is in now. And ultimately, consumers will know when these fish are caught and where they're caught from. And we believe there's a huge upside in terms of premium for these seafood products to go into these lucrative, particularly Asian markets. So it's a very exciting initiative.
I think there's 19 initiatives now within the PGP, and you one announced recently with New Zealand Merino for strong wool. It was, $700 million across the board? It's a big portfolio. What's your take on progress within that?
Our progress is going really well, and this is about industry partnering with government actually to get some stretch initiatives that wouldn't otherwise happen. It's about research and development. It's about market opportunities. You look at another one that's really exciting. It's the Steep Land Harvester. Good old Kiwi ingenuity and a workshop in Nelson. They've designed this. It's basically a digger that will operate on steep land slopes, and now they've designed it that there'll be no human operator sitting in the cab, because we know that the forestry industry's had some issues in the past, and now this machine is being exported all over the world, particular interest in British Columbia. And you touched on the wool one. That's another exciting one. NZ Merino's done well in their space and fine micron wool, but there hasn't been a lot happening in the crossbred wool, so they've stepped into this space, and ultimately they believe that this could contribute $335 million back to farmers in the New Zealand economy by 2025. In essence, try and get closer to the market, take out the auction variability, where in the past we've shoved this wool into 180 kilo bales and off it goes. Thinking more strategically about getting closer to the consumer and the end user, just like NZ Merino's done, and this is another exciting one.
Have you got a cap of any description for the PGP? An area where you're saying, look, that's probably going to be enough at any given time? Or are you just happy to have the ideas come in?
Yeah, there's interest all the time, and as we move through this, programs conclude. And so we've got expressions of interest coming in all the time from industry players. It'd be fair to say that we've got some fantastic initiatives right through the value chain. We're pretty much covering it all now. If you look at horticulture and viticulture, we've got lifestyle wine happening in avocados, which is hugely exciting. We've got forestry that we've talked about, honey, Manuka honey, fisheries we've talked about, a lot in the red meat space, actually getting our products into market. We've talked about wool, quite a bit in the pastoral sense in terms of Farm IQ and modern technology, the red meat profit for partnership, trying to understand why 20% of our sheep and beef farmers are returning 4 times the average, regardless of locality and things like that. So we're delving into that detail. And of course the dairy one, which we were celebrating the other day, mozzarella that used to take a couple of months to produce, now Fonterra is doing it in a few hours, and there's been significant investment and job creation from that. So huge excitement in the Primary Growth Partnership.
Glad to hear you mention horticulture. Aren't they having a good run? Talk about a diversified economy. Kiwi fruit, pip fruit, wine, avocados, nailing it this year.
Yes, they are. And I was up in the Bay of Plenty recently, and the kiwi fruit guys have just rebounded from PSA. It's incredible, the positivity now. Orchard prices for kiwi fruit in the Bay of Plenty, they tell me, are now above pre-PSA levels. So hort is actually a fantastic success story for New Zealand, worth about $8 billion now, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership for the hort industry alone is worth about $26 million in terms of tariff eliminations, and huge upside there as well. I was up with avocados recently. They've just come on board. They're the 7th industry signatory on our biosecurity government industry agreements, which is basically where industries sit down with MPI and work on preparedness and response. And we know biosecurity is hugely important to us as an exporting nation. And from time to time we do have things like a Queensland fruit fly that does get across our border. It's about how we manage it. So now avocados and many other industry players will be sitting down around the table, making sure that they're working closely with the government on preparedness and response. And these initiatives are going really well. I've had very positive feedback. And
I note that the new levy introduced on tourists to attract some money to help them share the load in terms of biosecurity hasn't actually caused any downturn in tourist numbers. In fact, I think they're up.
Yeah, that's right. It's rather ironic. Tourism numbers this summer will be a record, and ultimately there'll be over 5.5 million passengers coming across our border in the 12-month period. And the levy that we've brought in is all about ensuring that its user pays, and 55% of people that cross our borders are international travellers. We just feel it's more appropriate that the cost lies with them. What it ultimately means is that as we see an increase in passenger numbers, we will be able to do more at the border because we'll be gathering more revenue. So instead of me having to go back to the Minister of Finance through the budget process every year saying, hey, we need some more money on the border, ultimately it'll mean that we'll be able to match demands at our border with more services because we'll be better funded. So this levy has been appreciated, particularly by our horticulture and pastoral sectors, because they see it as one of fairness. So tourism numbers are booming. We're doing more in the biosecurity space. Last year's budget, an extra $27 million. That means we've got more dog detector teams. That's the dog and the handler. We've got X-ray machines, and some of them are portable X-rays that we can machines that we can move around the country. Hugely important for the cruise industry. More people operating at the front line as well. We're beefing up our import health standards, and we came up with a very novel in-flight video called Officer Good Boy, and it's a caricature with T Radar doing the voiceover with the Beagle, and it's about a minute and a half long, and it'll be played on these major airlines when they come into New Zealand on descent, and I'm sure it'll get passengers' attention just to ensure that they are focused on filling out their declaration. Otherwise, they could incur a $400 infringement fee.
Too right. Minister, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for all your time today. We greatly appreciate it. We should probably talk to you more regularly, and we'll endeavour to do that. Thank you again.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Roger.
This interview was brought to you in association with Rabobank.